All right, so I'm here in my media room. This is, it's a decent sized media room. I think before the addition went onto the house, this used to actually be the original living room of the house. I have a lot of records and CDs up here and vinyl all over the place. Before we moved into this house, there was actually a grand piano in this room, which was very, very cool. If I can find a photo of the listing, I'll post it here. But there's a grand piano over here, so we're kind of continuing the tradition of this being like a media room. It is also the only room we didn't paint when we moved in. This room was red when we moved in, like the red, but I think we're going to like refresh it and update it. I was sitting here one day, a couple days ago, looking over at this wall that I had. I was like, this room needs like a fireplace. A fireplace would be great. So I'm going to go electric, plug into the wall. I got a plug right here I can kind of very easily tap into and just kind of make it, it's going to be more like an aesthetic look than it is like an actual like functioning fireplace. I mean, it's going to function. I'm going to probably get a box that can like spit out some heat and stuff, but I don't really need it for that. It's more just like the vibe. You sit here, listen to some music, you can watch the fireplace crackle and all that kind of stuff. We're still kind of TBD on the design of the fireplace. Probably end up putting some sort of like paneling of some sort. I don't want to do like a shiplap, but like we were talking about possibly like a cool design out of the architectural panel. My wife doesn't really like the butt joints on those architectural panels, or those, I'm sorry, acoustical panels. Once we land on something, we'll do it. I want a very like wood look, like a kind of like a warm wood look. So like maybe some dark tones, maybe like a stained wood or a walnut, depending on the price. I don't want to like break the bank on doing this thing because it is just an aesthetic thing. And funny enough, I actually already have a mantle in mind. A buddy who I have lives on a farm, and the farm actually renovates old barns and old stuff. And one day he shoots me a text like, "Hey, I got a bunch of beams. You want some?" I'm like, "Hell yeah!" So I go over there. These are like nice, like 100-plus-year-old beams, hand hewn. Like you can see the hand, like scraper marks. I would imagine if someone were to take them and process them, they could probably sell them to a renovator, to someone who redecorating and make a really good profit. I got them for free, so I'm like, awesome. The other thing I also got for free there too was like because I had to harvest them myself and go cut them up and put them in my car. I got a nice like welt. I was on the pile. I took a wrong step. I fell, bruised myself really bad, like on my shin. Like, and this was months ago, and it's still kind of like the remnants of it there. I'll throw a photo up there. I took a couple photos because they're like really gnarly, really, really deep bruise. No cuts, no like bleeding, but like it really hurt. I messed myself up for a good bit. Yeah, that was not fun. But I got these free beams, which I plan on using one for the mantle here. The problem with that right now is my wife is not sure if she wants a mantle. She's still very much TBD on that. I love the idea of a mantle for a fireplace. You can decorate, but like you can put things on top of it and whatnot, and lights or other sort of decorations. So depending on the style we go for, the design we go for, we may or may not have a mantle. You may see a separate video of me building a mantle later. That said, what I want to do is like actually I'm going to lay it out with some tape. Probably just take some blue tape and just kind of like give a general idea of what it's going to look like. I'll throw a photo up of that, like the initial general layout. Get an electrical fireplace box on online. I'm going to rip some of the trim off. I'm going to start framing it out and whatnot too. And then once we kind of get there, I'm not planning on putting like a TV or anything above it because I don't have a TV in this room. I don't really have a desire to put a TV in this room. Even though I don't want a TV, I'll probably eventually plan for a TV. I'll like run some power up to it so that, if ever we want to put a TV up there, we can like, I'll cut a hole into it and put a box in there for a junction box so we can power it. But plan for the future, but not necessarily needing it now. So I don't want to ruin the look of it. But that's kind of like where we're at right now. So I'm going to jump into it, putting a fireplace into it. So let's go. With the magic of editing, we will now jump into me building the fireplace. So the first step here is to remove the trim. I definitely removed the crown molding. I removed the base molding. Just took an oscillating multi-tool to the trim, and then I used a trim puller to pop it out. Funny enough, behind this, there was a lot of draft coming through, so I used an expanding phone to kind of keep that draft coming through because it wouldn't be easily accessible to get to this area after I closed it all in. So I did that first, and then we start with the framing. So we stick about 9.5 inches off the wall on each side. That's the full width off the wall to bump off. We need 6 inches of clearance for the firebox. Went with 9.5 to give me some room and some play in the back. And also, in case I ever wanted to run something else, another wire, like later install a television or something else, some sort of light fixture, whatever, I had some room to play with. And also, I think 9.5 inches plus, adding the sheathing would give us about 10 inches off the wall. Plus a future mantle, which would basically kind of put us total about 14, 15 inches off the wall, depending on the width of the mantle I end up using. So that just seems like a good number to kind of start with. I'm kind of making this up as I go along. I didn't really have some instructions. I just kind of took a bunch of measurements and just kind of looked at it from an aesthetic vibe and a feeling. Now it's time to secure everything. A couple screws into the floor, make sure everything's plumb and level. screws in the floor, screws in, in the ceiling into some studs, just to kind of make sure everything's good. Now, it's not going to be holding a ton of weight, but if I ever did want to put a television on there, or, just randomly someone hanging on or whatever, just kind of overbuild. I tend to overbuild things just to make sure everything's good. I don't think there's any wrong with that. And then I sunk a couple into the studs into the wall, into the joists in the roof, and into the hardwood floor. This is me building out the firebox. Put a couple cripple studs next to a jack studs. Got the rough opening for the firebox, obviously from the instructions. Your firebox will obviously vary depending on what you have, but I definitely overbuilt this. Actually, it's funny. As you see the horizontal plane that I have there, which was where the firebox will actually sit. I put a 2x4 in there. I actually ended up removing that later and put in a 2x6 just to kind of give me a little bit more of a flat surface for the firebox to sit on. The firebox wasn't that heavy. A 2x4 would have held it perfectly fine. The instructions recommended a 2x6. That is definitely a little bit of an overkill, but I had one, so I just cut it and put it in place. I cut one to fit, put it in place. As you can see in the back, there's a little, right off the bottom of the blue tape, which is like kind of where I taped out the firebox on the wall. There is a little outlet. That is the outlet I'm going to plug the firebox into. That will be hidden by the actual final structure. You will not see that. I actually later will take an extension off of that and basically put a jack onto the side too, so I actually don't lose a plug in the room. So there actually ultimately will be a plug on the actual fireplace once everything's said and done. All right, so a couple days have passed this whole process. My wife and I were just kind of debating how we wanted to skin this. We were originally talking about doing some planks, and I mentioned that. Push comes to shove, the type of wood we wanted to use something a little more upscale. We're looking at about $1,000 just in the covering for this, and I wanted to try to keep the entire project under $1,000. So we looked at some other options, and we found these acoustic panels. I think we found them on Wayfair, and they were like they're marked down there like $10 a square foot or so, something like that, which is really great. Got 4 boxes for the full coverage, and 48 inches long, 6.5 inches wide, I believe. So we needed about 4 boxes to cover it. I think we're talking about like 52 square feet, 53 square feet over and all. Probably about 8 inches too short. So if we were to do it horizontal, we'd have to stagger the joints and have butt joints. I'm not a fan of that. My wife's not a fan of the butt joints. Vertically, we could probably make something work from like top of the fireplace to the mantle and then down below. But vertical is kind of how everyone does these. So we actually opted for, and we saw someone lay it out like this on the examples when we bought it, is we're going to go with a bit of a chevron pattern. So you kind of sync them up like that. There's your triangle, your basically your point, and then you do the next one below that, and the next one above that, just kind of run all the way down. I've actually seen a chevron pattern go down, which is kind of interesting, but we decided to go for like the up pattern. Set it up, do that to the end, do a jig, and just track saw it. Just, I'll bust out some foam, create a jig on top of the track saw, and just run it with the track saw. It should be a nice clean cut from that, nice like direct good cut, because I definitely want to get these cuts good because the way they're going to butt up against the trim. I can't necessarily just affix it to each stud and expect like the point to kind of land. So I'm just going to sheathe the whole thing. Just get a couple like really skinny hardboard sheathing Lawan or something like that. Maybe some sanded ply, whatever's the cheapest they have at the store. I just put a couple sheets up that just so I can stick it wherever I need to stick it. And then I can trim it and then we should be good to go. Yeah, we're deviating from the original plan, but I actually think this is kind of cool. I think it'll look very interesting. I've seen this, obviously, this effect done, it seems to be kind of in vogue right now, but I haven't seen it done in a chevron pattern on a fireplace. So I'm really excited to see how that turns out. This stuff, just to kind of give you a better look at it, it's white oak with a weathered finish, they call it. And the backer, which I don't know if you can see either, which is the black part of it, it's actually a fairly thick felt. I would say it's a 1/4 inch of the wood. You have probably a full 1/2 inch. 1/4 inch of it's the wood, 1/4 inch it's the felt. So I want to figure out how to cut the felt, but the felt looks pretty reasonable to cut. And obviously it'll provide acoustic purposes, which I don't really need, but whatever. I wonder if it actually would help with a little bit of heat retention, keep some of the cold air out. Not that this thing's going to really be pumping off a lot of heat. It's not a real fireplace. just more for an effect. So I'm not really worried about like the heatness of it. We'll find out, but let's get it up on the wall. Let's see how it looks. Let's hope it looks awesome. Or we might be changing this whole look after it's all done. Who knows? Now that we've landed on the paneling, we need to actually lay some sheathing because this will allow me to kind of basically peel and stick anywhere I want on the fireplace. So I got some really thin sanded plywood. Now I'm just going to kind of cut it down to size using my track saw to get it all nice and working. And once I put this on the fireplace, I don't have to worry about where I'm sticking the paneling to. Didn't originally plan to do this mainly because I wasn't looking to originally do that paneling, but now that I am, got to put the sheathing up there to make my life a lot easier. Just taking this, 20, 30 minutes to kind of bang this out initially will make putting that paneling on much, much easier in the long run. As you can see, I also put in blocking up the top and the bottom. That's where, in case we ever wanted to mount a TV or in case we wanted to mount a mantle, I have blocking there for that. So the sheathing goes on, and then we're going to do the peel and stick tile over the sheathing. Again, only decided to use the sheathing just because I did not do like a shiplap or some sort of hardwood kind of paneling decoration. So the foreman coming to check on my work, seeing what's going on there. He's always not too far from me. He's never further than like 5-10 feet from wherever I'm at. Now, rather than measure any sort of sheathing, for the firebox hole, I literally just took a spiral flush trim bit, threw it into my palm router, and just routed out the hole. It was much easier to do. A little louder than usual, a little bit more messier than usual, but way easier than kind of cutting and measuring. It's a little trick. Actually, it's a trick that a lot of drywallers use. Use some liquid nails to put all the sheathing on as well. Here's a shot of me doing that. So basically, yeah, screws are holding the sheathing plus the liquid nails as well, just to kind of, again, just make it rock solid so there's no chance of anything kind of falling. Wanted to overbuild this, and of course I did. So now it's time to make some trim. We've got a 6-inch piece of wood. It's red oak because the paneling is white oak, and I'm going to stain this, so I only really needed it to for the pattern of the grain more so than the color, because it's going to be ebonized black, which I'll show you. So basically just cut it to length, and I ripped it down so I had two sides, and we kind of ran it through the table saw. No big deal here, just doing a nice little rip. Funny enough, moments after this, my table saw broke. So this was one of the final cuts I made on the table saw before it broke. But yeah, just ripped it, then ran a 45 down each one of those runs, and then just kind of put together, make a nice little corner piece on both sides of the whole overall. Didn't have a lot of cuts to make, but yeah, just kind of stuck my table saw breaking on me. But here we go. I'm putting them all together. Wood glue, giving the wood glue a chance to dry, make a 45. Then I'm going to clean this up too. This isn't going to be nearly as big as it looks on this thing. Some trim clamps to kind of keep it all in place while the glue dries. I'll also drop a couple pin nails in here too. Again, just kind of like overbuilding it just to make sure it all works. I started with 80 grit just to kind of clean everything up and work my way up to about 180 grit. I didn't go super, super smooth, just mainly because like sometimes once you go too much, like, your stains and your finishes won't really hold the stain too much. So basically started with a very coarse, knocking everything down, just kind of work my way up. But, sanding, it's part of the job. Everyone has to do it. All right, so I left the touch-up coat. Basically, I just kind of like filled in any gaps I missed here and kind of give it a nice little hand sand and a little round over this. And then, as you can see, the difference in the color between these two is a little darker. I just wiped this down with mineral spirits. So I'm going to wipe everything down with mineral spirits, which is going to bring it down to that red color, get all the dust off. Kind of act like a little grain pop, even though I hit it with 220 with the hand sand. So there's not going to be much of a grain pop going on there, just to get all the dirt and crap off of it. I'm going to hit this one with mineral spirits as well, so it'll basically look the same. Let it dry for a little bit, and then it's time for ebonization. The next step here is super simple. It's called ebonization, which is a fancy word, as I mentioned, for dyeing something black, staining something black. We're going to use some India ink, regular old India ink. You can get pretty much anywhere, from like calligraphy sets or anything kind of used in, I'm sure you've all used India ink from like, your high school art projects or whatnot. And if you haven't, well, this is one of the things you can do with it. And essentially, it's super simple. It's the same idea as stain. I like it personally, first of all, because it's cheap. It's extremely cheap. It puts on a really nice finish and a nice stain. And what it really does is it allows a lot of the wood grain to really kind of come through, and it looks almost like shiny under. And then once it dries, which is very quick, you basically put it on, paint it on. In this case, I'm going to paint it on with a little brush, and then wipe it down after a little bit. Then once it dries, you can put whatever type of poly cover you want on it, whether it be a shiny, a matte, gloss, whatever it might be. So it doesn't really take a much, and the process is about as simple as it gets. I'm just going to fill a little old coffee cup thing here and then just start painting it on. Really, that's what I'm going to do. So it's super simple to do. So here we go. It looks like it, and it's quite thick too, as far as coverage wise. It doesn't take much, and you just kind of let it stay on there for a little bit. Get it all in. It's also good for seeping into grains, any wood grain you might have, and you can kind of, depending on how deep, darker grain you want, you could leave it on there for a little bit longer or not a lot longer. So I'm going to wipe it down now, and it's as simple as that. You just kind of wipe off the excess. Then we're just going to hit the back. The back is not going to be seen, but at the same time, making sure it's covered helps in the long run because, depending on what angle someone might catch it at, you might see it. So I'm just going to hit that real quick. You can leave this on long, and it'll obviously penetrate a little longer, but for the sake of what I'm doing, since I'm trying to match / complement more of a gray wood, I'm not going to leave it on for terribly too long. Let me get this other one over here, repeat the process, and then I'll jump on that side of the bench, so table, whatever you call it, and get that into. But it's so satisfying to watch it go on because it's just like, it's like instant coverage. It's wild to see. And this is one of the reasons I use red oak instead of like white oak, because literally no one's going to know if you use white or red oak because of the stain. You're just going to, they're mostly going to look for grain pattern recognition, and I would even make the argument that the average person wouldn't even recognize grain. And there you have it. It's been a minute since I finally wiped it down. As you can see, it's a really cool matte effect. Obviously, it's not shiny, but you see a nice grain pop in it. There's obviously some spots that need a little bit of touching up, but this is the first coat. Took me about 5 minutes to do the whole thing, maybe even less if I wasn't recording. But as you can see, very, very prominent grain, yet it's like jet black. So that's kind of the effect I was going for, the look I was looking for. And again, I just used regular old India ink. I'm probably going to need to touch up in a couple spots. Like if I have to trim this to make it fit, I might have to touch up, but it's super easy to touch up. Just literally like just tapping spots, and that's the look. I'm still debating whether or not to put a poly of some sort over it. I'll make that decision, but touch-ups will be needed. But in general, that's what it looks like. India ink.
Now it's time to actually install that trim. So I wanted a very, very snug fit. So I actually kind of like marked my line, and then I just kind of kept creeping up to it because I wanted to fit as tight as humanly possible. In fact, I actually put a little scratch in the ceiling getting this trim installed, but it was super tight for me, and I actually needed to patch the ceiling anyway for a future project. I got a compression fit, and the compression fit was very tight, but obviously I wanted to make sure it was all nice and snug. So drove a few finish nails in there that you can't really see. I did a few little touch-ups of it in place, did a little bit of ink around where the trim would be, just in case any of the paneling kind of like needed a little bit of help by covering up something. And then I just went back over it, filled a couple holes with some putty and some filler, let that dry, sanded it lightly, and then hit it with some India ink again. Then it's time to go to the paneling and to make a jig so I'm able to cut the paneling.
All right, so I'm back down in my shop. I made a very quick and dirty jig. I basically took two pieces, just like some scrap plywood, screwed them down here. Obviously, this is foam board because I'm going to cut this way, basically. But obviously, they don't stick on there very, very well, but it's enough. I got my giant framing square because I know these angles are 45s. I just took a piece and I butted up in between these two so they can kind of sit, you know, comfortably in that. And I'm going to cut my cut right here with track saw, and these scrap 2x4s, I'm sorry, plywood. The scrap plywood also allows for me to just basically have some of the support of the actual track saw. Since I'm only supporting it in the 6 inches, now I get like, you know, another 20 inches or so on the whole thing. So my cuts are going to be made right here on track saw, my 45s. I got a really, really loose jig. This is a factory edge of my foam. And I put my giant framing square at a 45, obviously, and I just tacked them down just so they'd stay. They're not like in there hard, but now I'm going to be able to run the track saw right across and kind of cut these things at a 45. So the first one is going to be the most difficult because it's going to kind of set the tone for the rest of them. So I'm going to make sure my line's right here. I'm going to get a lighter mark. I have some yellow markers so I can actually see the line that I'm trying to cut at, so whatnot. We're going to give it a go. Going to just go nice and slow and low on the track saw and just kind of like see what we got. But that's just a really rough and dirty, quick and dirty jig I'm kind of got set up for this. So nice clean cut. We're in business.
Back to the fireplace. Found the center. Used a laser level, and then got my 4-foot regular level out there, and just kind of made a big mark in the middle of the fireplace, just so I have like my dead center over the firebox, my dead center of the entire structure, and it allowed me to start laying things out. And here you can see I'm starting to do that. Basically, just kind of finding that middle part, laying it out, playing around with it, just kind of getting it to fit, snugging up parts, making my marks, creeping up on marks. This is the tedious part of the process, but it's also the most visual part of the process. So take your time and plan, then cut, then plan, then cut again. Basically, it's the strategy here. The side panels I cut nice and tight on a miter saw. These are all miter saw cuts, but it allowed me to really kind of get nice and tight in there with the side cuts. Those, as you can see, are horizontal. I started them at one spot and kind of ran them up. You know, putting a design there would have been a kind of futile because we're literally like we have 9 inches there, so it would have been a lot of work. But also at the same time, just allowed me to use a bunch of offcuts too, also to put up here too. So those slid into place. They look really good. It's kind of like looking. It was like kind of like running almost up off the sides into a point if you look at it from a long distance. But really happy with how those sides panels kind of like came together. And after I put everything in and got it nice and tight and fit, I pressed it on with hand, but then I would hit it with a J roller. So everything here got hit with a J roll, and that's just kind of like fully kind of get everything to link and stick together. So it's basically peel, stick, get by hand, whack it all into place, make sure it's level, and then hit it with a J roller, and we should be good to go. That's basically what I did with every panel. Make sure it's level, J roller, hand, go. Once we got around the firebox, the cuts got a little trickier, mainly because like we have to cut the angle on the side, we have to cut the angle around the firebox. Cuts got a little more tedious around the firebox, but again, take your time, measure, work up the lines, cut once, cut again, J roller, and then just kind of hand press and get it go. Just take your time. Just did a quick run at the bottom with some India ink to make sure that if anything was exposed, it would be covered by the black ink. And India ink, again, it's great to work with. It gives you nice, quick staining, and it's very easy, low odor, all that kind of stuff. It just provides a really good stain. So I just kind of like put some on the back of the sheathing just to make sure that if there anything did show through at the bottom, it wouldn't be noticeable. The paneling done, and now it's time to prep the firebox. Firebox is super easy. There's multiple ways these fireboxes can be installed depending on how you're doing. You can attach them right to a wall. Obviously, I'm screwing them into this little insert open area that I made. As you can see right now, plugging it into the back plug. It runs off a standard 150, and then I'm just kind of working it into the box. It was a very, very tight, snug fit. Slide it into place, getting everything kind of nice and snug and out of the way, making sure the cord's not in my way, and then just kind of putting it in place into the box. The glass insert of the firebox is then removed. This is done for a few reasons. One, to put in whatever sort of bed you want to put. It comes with a log feature or a crystal feature, but it also allows us to secure the box into the actual fireplace frame, and that's just a matter of just taking a couple screws, driving, I think it's 2 on the left and 2 on the right into the studs, and you're good to go. We're going with the crystals for the actual architectural feature, I guess you want to call them. There's 2 options here. There's crystals, and there's also like a log feature. We opted for the crystals, just kind of a little fun. I think we might eventually swap it out to the logs because the logs looks a little quote unquote natural look to it. But that being said, we're fine with these crystals, and these crystals actually reflect a lot of light. So there's some small crystals and some big crystals. It's just a matter of like dumping them into the tray, and then they light up like nice once you're finished. Now it's time to turn everything on and just see what works. So yeah, once we turn everything on, this is us just playing with all the fire. There's a bunch of different design settings, color schemes, temperature settings, crackling settings. It's got a bunch of different stuff that I just started running through and just kind of double check and make sure everything works. There's so many features on this box. I'll probably never ever even begin to use nearly half of any of them. And with that, this project is done. We've got a nice firebox, got a really interesting, compelling design going on, nice dark, earthy colors, and couldn't be more excited about the outcome.
And there you have it. Firebox is installed. Everything's finished. Took me a decent amount of time, before I go into all the details. But this is remote controlled. It's also controlled by an app. I opted for like a mid-level firebox to use, mainly because I wanted to make sure that I had light clearance here. I've seen a lot of fireboxes, especially on the cheaper side that you see on like an Amazon. They're like the 150 range. They'll have a nice 3 inches on each side before you actually start seeing the fire. And I didn't want that. I wanted actually just right now I have about an inch once you start getting into the fire. So it's great. This thing has a ton of features. You can change the color of the bed. You can change the color of the fire. You can change the color of the secondary fire. You can change the brightness of it. There is a couple of features I'm not using. There's a feature on there which allows you to do ambient light. And that actually basically you connect it to a string of LED lights that would sit behind maybe the TV if you had a TV up there, and it would ambiently light the television. So there's a lot of features. There's also a thermostat in there, basically a little tab in there. And funny enough, there's even a crackling sound. You can have it make a crackling sound too. So there's a lot of features there, timer, all that kind of stuff. And obviously that will vary based on what you end up using for your own firebox. So a few things about this before we kind of jump into the costs. One, I framed it and I ran electrical up there. So if I ever do want to eventually put a TV up there or something else, I have basically the electrical running to it. I can just basically splice it off of this box, and it's right there. It's framed. There's enough framing back there to be able to put any sort of a load on it that would hold a TV. Not planning on putting a TV up there, but in case the future ever happens. I basically just kind of pre-built it for any possible thing. So a future mantle, future TV. Once that debate between my wife and I about who wins the mantle debate, you'll either see a follow-up video, this is me adding a mantle, or you will not, because we've not put a mantle up there. But so you're basically asking me what's the cost. Now the cost will obviously vary, but I think all in on about $1,200, give or take. Plywood, 2x4s, electrical boxes, blocking, all that kind of stuff ran me probably about $200. 2x4s are fairly cheap these days. The plywood that I used wasn't the thickest plywood. I literally just wanted the thinnest stuff I could possibly find. So I basically used Lawan. I think that was $39 a sheet, 25. No, it was $39 a sheet, something like that. So I needed 2 of those. So that's a big expense. And I think I probably used about 10 to 12 different 2x4s in there, just basically building all the structures and whatnot. So yeah, all that kind of stuff that you'll never see. The firebox. I went for a mid-level firebox, and obviously depending on the level of firebox you go for, you're going to have more features, less features, that type of stuff. Size of the firebox matters. This one's a 32-inch firebox, I believe. There's a good, better, best when it comes to fireboxes, and you can get very long ones. This one actually has a couple different features. It comes with a couple different ways to install it. You can mount it on the wall. You can do what I did, put it into the box. So there's a couple different ways to kind of install the fireboxes, and it kind of comes with a bunch of different stuff. It's totally electric. It's the regular old voltage. You just plug it into a regular plug in the wall. There was an option to hardwire it. Didn't feel that was necessary to hardwire it. There's one plug back there already. I didn't need to. That ran me $230. Like I said, it's kind of mid-level. There's very, very high end and big ones. You can get the thousands of dollars for the firebox, and the cheapest ones you get on Amazon are $120, something like that. And I kind of went for the better, the good, better, best. I went for the better, and mostly, like I said, I was going more for the aesthetic as opposed to the features. So, do I care that it crackles? No. Do I care that you can change 17 different colors? Yeah, of course. Once we find a color we end up using it. And it also came with a different way of being able to set up logs in the bottom if you didn't want to do the crystal feature. But happy with this. It was a very easy thing to install, the firebox. It was almost nothing. The hardest part was reading the manual and syncing the Wi-Fi up to the app. So yeah, I learned that the app can actually sync to Google Assistant. So I can actually turn this thing on and off by using my Google Home smart speaker. So it was a feature I wasn't even aware of until I was kind of looking through everything and downloaded the app. So, hey, Google, turn off the media room fireplace. There you go. In additional costs, so firebox, then we also have the wood and the paneling. Then the wood, and then the sheathing. The biggest part was these wood. We needed 52 square feet. It equated to about 3.5 boxes ultimately. So I got a little bit of this paneling left, which I might use for a small accent somewhere. There's a spot over here I might accent, just to kind of complement it, whatnot too. But yeah, that was probably the most expensive. Actually, it wasn't probably. It was the most expensive part was this paneling. When all said and done, it was $620 and some change. We ordered it online. Yeah, so I have a little bit of this paneling left. I probably could have gotten away with 3 boxes, maybe even 2.5. had I not had diagonal cuts, because there was a lot of cutoffs with this thing. So there's a lot of like extra cutoffs for this whole thing. If I were just to run them all vertically or run it all horizontally, we probably would have used less material. Yeah, so $620, and you got another, like I said, 230, 240 for the firebox, plus the 200 something. I think in the grand scheme of things, it all broke down to, like I said, about $1,200 for the whole process. So, oh, and then the wood, I had to buy some of the redwood trim too, so that was another like 50, 60 bucks just for the wood that I ebonized. Other than my time, I didn't cost my labor into this, obviously, because I was doing it for my own house. But like as far as time I spent on it, a couple weekends here and there. So yeah, so if I had like, fully taken like a week off to do it, I would have banged it out probably quicker. I probably could have banged it out in like 3 days. But weekend here, running get supplies there, waiting for supplies to arrive, that kind of stuff. But that's kind of par for the course when you're doing stuff yourself, especially when it's not your full-time job. Overall, thoroughly excited and satisfied with this project. It's great. I think it came out extremely well, and I've never used this paneling before, but it was very easy to cut. It was very easy to use, and the angles were very easy to get. I mean, it's basically just what's 45s and 90s when it comes to angles. So difficulty level, it's not something, I wouldn't say it was like beginner, but if you know how to frame and if you're patient, take your time, you can definitely do it. I would put it at like an 8 on a difficulty scale. I wouldn't say it's your first DIY project to do. But, if you're familiar with how to use tools and cuts and angles and all that kind of stuff, 8 because of time and tediousness. But as far as like if you're just like slapping panel on or you go for a different design, you could even, the difficulty level can come way down. Because like this is obviously a more intricate design than I would say the average fireplace is. But, all said and done, zero complaints about it. Love the look, love the aesthetic, love how it warms the room. It looks great. Love all the features of the firebox. I'll actually throw a link to the firebox and what I used. Maybe I'll throw a link to everything actually of the panels that I used and the firebox that I used in the description. So if you want to kind of like mimic this look, if you do, that'd be super flattering. If not, you hate it, understood too, because it's not a look for everyone. But I thoroughly like the way it came out. My wife does too. So I guess that's all that matters. Till next time, till next build, I'll see you later.